pandemics.
You're now live.
We're now live, and I'm going to call the Senate Finance Committee to order on, this is March 23rd. And first item on the agenda is Commissioner Pika. The governor has nominated him to continue as the Commissioner of Financial Regulation. And we were kind of jiving him about doing all the numbers crunching, new job set of job skills, pandemic tracing, but the floor is yours, Commissioner. Tell us why you want to continue in this job.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate the committee's time and attention to the reappointment. And yeah, certainly, really excited about staying on as a commissioner at Department of Financial Regulation. We're certainly right in the middle of the thicket, if you will. There's a lot going on from a department perspective. There's a lot, in terms of the pandemic response. We're right. I think everybody agrees that we're right in that sort of that fourth quarter, that late period of the pandemic. But of course, we need to finish strong and want to do everything that we can as a department and everything I can as an individual to help us finish strong, certainly.
Okay. What about the department? How's it doing?
Yeah, so the department has been excellent. I mean, we oftentimes fly under the radar as a department, until maybe more recent times, and they continue to do excellent work, day in and day out. On the captive front, over the last 14 months, we've licensed over 50 captives. We had 38 captives last year. Just in the first couple of months this year, we're up to, I think it's 12 or 13. So, the captive side has been very busy in terms of new companies. They're all good companies. They're big size companies. They're going to be, new Vermont taxpayers. So that's been great to see. A lot of that has been driven by the pandemic, as either people want to take control of their risk, they want to, or they don't have insurance offered to them. They have, new types of risk like pandemic risk that they want to, build a captive insurance program for. That has all been, again, really great this past year. Thinking about the traditional insurance side, they've been doing excellent work also. They've been working a lot on premium refunds for Vermont consumers. We have about 25 million that have been approved for auto policyholders because people are driving less during the pandemic. And we're also doing an analysis to make sure that is a sufficient amount that has been returned to Vermonters, because we've been driving a lot less, not just a little bit less. Things have changed a lot. So, that has been certainly work, related to the department, but obviously also pandemic related. Similarly, we had about 3.5 million in dental refunds that we've approved that have been sent back to Vermonters because they couldn't access dental care, during the early part of the pandemic. And we have an ongoing analysis relating to health insurance as well, whether there's been an overpayment on health insurance, and we've done some analysis there also. So, on the traditional insurance side, those are some of the issues keeping us busy. They also, our insurance team led by Deputy Commissioner Kevin Gaffney, they've continued to do great work on certain pain points that we've identified for multiple years. One of the pain points being worker compensation insurance. Rates continue to go down this year. They'll go effective on April 1st. But when they go effective on April 1st, the decrease over the last 5 years, it's been 5 years of decreases, will be an aggregate of 36%. So a pretty significant reduction. And some of that is employers, doing a good job keeping their employees safe. But a good portion of it is, the insurance division looking really critically at the filings, making sure that Vermonters and Vermont businesses aren't overpaying. And they've done a really good job on that front. And they've also created a few incentive programs to incentivize employers, particularly in high risk areas. Log hauling is the classic example, but to incentivize high risk workers to get certified to get a further reduction in their worker comp rates. And that program continues and it's up and running. And we have a number of companies that have been certified. This was really a couple of year dream of ours to get up and running. And despite the pandemic, it's now up and running and people are seeing the benefit of that. So again, on the traditional insurance side, things are going really well. The banking side, things are going well there also. They continue to regulate our banks for safety and soundness. Our banks, I think, as everybody on this call can appreciate, have been stretched this past year in many different ways. They've provided a lot of relief that we encourage them to provide to Vermonters in terms of deferments on loan payments or forgiveness of certain late fees, things of that nature. And they've done a really good job. And in all honesty, the credit unions and the banks have done a really good job on that front, providing flexibility to their customers. I can't say they've been perfect in every instance, but we've been pleased with that flexibility. And they've actually shown, with all the different pandemic relief money that's come into the state, and in some ways, people not being able to spend their money in the same ways as pre-pandemic, the deposits at Vermont banks have actually gone up 20% during the pandemic. So I think that's also a good sign post-pandemic about additional monies that are ready to be deployed in our economy, either from the consumer standpoint, that consumers will be spending some of that money, or that lending institutions will have more money to lend out to businesses. So optimistic about that, as well. And then, just the last thing I'll mention, because this covers all of our divisions, the consumer protection piece is really the heart of our department. And, we continue in earnest throughout the pandemic, identifying situations where businesses have not held up their end of the bargain for Vermonters, and continue to do investigations, enforcement actions, continue to bring suits there to get restitution of Vermonters, and to make sure that companies are playing by the rules, and everybody is doing that equally, and that and when they do take a shortcut, or when they don't live up to the bargain that they've made to Vermonters, that that they have to account for that. So I want to thank our team at the department. Really, I should have said that at the beginning, but I've been very fortunate that we've had a really strong team from A through Z. Our staff, our supervisors, our deputy commissioners, our lawyers, everybody. A really strong team, and just when the pandemic hit, we were able to step up and do some things beyond what we normally do, and the only reason we could do that is because of the capable team that we have here at the department.
Committee, any questions for the commissioner? I've got Senator Bray and then Senator Hardy.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Good to see you.
Senator, nice to see you.
I'm just wondering if you could briefly talk, if you could remind us of how long you've been in the position. And because it seems like a while to me, but I forget when you started.
Me too. Time flies.
Yeah. To say something that you're pleased with in particular during your tenure, and then to comment on something that you have concerns about, let you feel like when your capacity shifts back to something more normal and your tasks, what's the first thing you'd really like to take on and see more progress on?
Yeah, those are great questions, Senator. Thank you. Thank you for that. So just from the biographical standpoint, I've been the commissioner since July of 2016. So I believe this July, that will be 5 years. So about 4.5 years or so as commissioner. And I was with the department, about 2.5 years before that as a deputy commissioner of security. So, been with the state now for over just about over 7 years. In terms of something that we're proud of when we look back, I think there's a lot to be proud of over the last 4.5 years. If I were to give a specific example, something recent that we're proud of, our team took on the hazard pay program, the second part of the hazard pay program that was to a much broader array of industries. I think it was about 20,000 people in total that were eligible. And, they have they either put down their day jobs or they continue to do their day jobs and did this work. And they had to figure out a process that worked. They had to figure out the technology that would work. We had to figure out how to both pay employers and then also figure out how to pay former employees. We had to figure out how to contact those former employees, and our team just excelled at that. They did an exceptional job. Jill Rickard, who's our director of policy, who you all know, really played an integral role in that. But we just, again, we brought the right resources to the job. We brought the right level of competence. They didn't have background or experience in it, but they were able to fill a gap and I think do something that really benefited Vermonters at a critical time during the pandemic. And I'm really proud of their work and proud of what the department was able to do. In terms of, turning back to things that keep us up at night, I think I'll just say one thing that has changed. There were a lot of different trends before the pandemic, whether it was work from home trend or whether it was, remote banking, whether it was telemedicine. There were things that consumers generally that were younger really liked in terms of technology. There were things that generally consumers that were older didn't like in terms of technology. And that did put our institutions in a little bit of a bind because they had to have a foot in both worlds. They had to have the brick and mortar, bank, but they also had they had to have all of the latest and greatest technology to satisfy, those that wanted every piece of mobile banking. And they had to figure out the cybersecurity and they had to figure out, all that comes with that. And the same is true on the healthcare side with telemedicine. And obviously some people didn't like telemedicine before the pandemic. But I do think the pandemic has accelerated some of those trends. I think more and more people are going to want to access their financial documents, do their banking, do their transactions remotely. People are now comfortable with it that maybe weren't comfortable with it before. Telemedicine is the same thing. I think that people are going to be more comfortable with that. The working from home, is another thing that I think both public and private sector are going to embrace in a way that they wouldn't have without the pandemic. And that changes things like, worker compensation insurance. What does your footprint look like for your building? What kind of insurance do you need? So all of those things impact financial services in a way. And I think we need to take stock of, how have they impacted them broadly and how have they impacted them in Vermont, and how do we respond as regulators? Because, it won't be the same world post-pandemic as it was going into the pandemic. And we need to be cognizant of that and change as well.
Thanks very much.
Hardy.
Thank you. Excuse me. It's good to see you, Commissioner.
Nice to see you.
Thank you for all your work during the pandemic. I've really appreciated your data drops and your data presentations. It's fascinating stuff, and it's been extremely helpful to the state in trying to get a handle on COVID. Senator Bray asked a couple of the questions I was going to ask, but I had a specific question about your consumer protection work at the department. That's something I'm a little less familiar with. And I'm wondering if you could explain what you do versus what maybe the Attorney General's office does, or how you work with them. And if there is a consumer, one of our constituents, for example, who has some sort of complaint, whatever it may be, how do they access the services that your department provides?
Yeah, no, great questions. And thank you for asking about that, because I think bragging on our consumer services division is my favorite thing to do. So I'm glad I get the opportunity to do that. But, we have the biggest consumer services group is in the insurance division. That's where most of our consumer complaints come from, is issues about claims with auto insurance, issues about, payments not getting made on time or getting processed in time, payments not coming back to individuals that should get payments. We have consumer services on banking as well. So if you have an issue with a bank card, or you have some issue with a mortgage being paid. And then on the security side also. So if you are, making investments in companies, if you're trying to roll over your 401k, if you're having an issue with an investment advisor, those are the kind of issues that come to our department. So I think anything that's financial services related, if it's impacting insurance, banking, or securities, that's something that really falls into our category. If it's something more general business, so if a business is telling you that this is the greatest kitchen product that exists, and then you buy it and it turns out that they never even deliver it to you, or it turns out to be a dud, that's more for the consumer protection division at the Attorney General's office. That sort of general business type of consumer protection. So on our side of the equation, in 2019, I don't have the numbers for 2020, but in 2019, we had over $5 million returned to Vermonters, either in restitution or in penalties that came to the state of Vermont. So a pretty significant amount. We had some really big penalties that year in particular. Healthcare is another example I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, but we're basically the only place, if you have an issue with your health insurance, that you can bring a complaint to. And our team, again, is really capable at getting results very quickly on all of those issues. But healthcare, we take a particular, interest in because of how important it is. And again, one of our lawyers here at the department, I'll just tell you an example of the work that they do. And this is something that would never show up in our data, but they had a concerned consumer that reached out, and their child wasn't going to get certain treatment that they should be getting under their insurance. And it was somewhat of an emergent situation. They, it wasn't helpful if they had to wait a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And this individual over the weekend, contacted the insurer, asked them, can you please provide all of the rationale for denying the service? Within a day, their decision was reversed, and the person was on their way to get the treatment that they needed, and hopefully, we'll have a good outcome. But those are the kind of interventions that we do regularly when people are able to get to us. So that's your other part of your question, is how do they get to us? And our website is our best resource. We have a online complaint form there that individuals can complete. We also have a phone line that continues to work throughout the pandemic that folks can call us about as well. And if you ever have constituents that have issues, please feel free to just email me or email Joe Rickard, and we'll quickly get you in touch with Brenda Clark, who is the head of the consumer division in insurance, and they'll do their magic.
Okay, that's great. That's really helpful for me. A follow-up question is, I asked Commissioner Bolio the same question about whether you are having a hard time or an easy time with filling positions and finding a workforce that is qualified to take on what I'm imagining are pretty complicated work duties at your department. And sort of related to that, how is the morale among your staff, given everything they've been through this past year?
Yeah, both are great questions, and both are things we really pay close attention to. Because on the employment front, when I became commissioner, 4.5 years ago, I really thought our team was strong, all the way through. They just had a good reputation. There are a lot of professionals. They've had industry experience. They've been with the department for a long time. They have advanced degrees. They're an MBA or a law degree. They're CPAs. I mean, they're just a good group of professionals. And I thought we really needed to make sure we maintained that quality, throughout our time. And the other issue was that we had a lot of retirements on the horizon. So, we don't generally lose folks that frequently to another job, that unless people obviously go on and do other things, but generally it's been to retirements, and we need to be able to make sure we have individuals ready to step up within the department, or that we can attract individuals from outside of the department as well. So I'll say that during the pandemic, we've had exceptional candidates for every job that we've opened up. And obviously there's been a hiring freeze, and we've been conservative with the type of jobs that we've been asking for. We really wanted more of the critical type of jobs, but there's 3 or 4 hirings that I've been closely familiar with. There's others I just am not as closely familiar with, but the ones that I have heard of and understand, the candidates that did get an interview and didn't get an interview, there are other years where the candidates that didn't get an interview would be the people that we would end up hiring. They're that high quality. So, we feel really fortunate. I think part of it, again, our general counsel, our deputies, they've built good teams themselves, and people, I think, are attracted to work for them. And that reputation, is there when people want to do their due diligence and find out what it's like to work for for our general counsel's office, or our insurance division, or our captive insurance division. I think they understand that it's a professional group, that, they're well compensated, relative to, the work-life balance that they can achieve. So we've had a lot of success with that and been very fortunate. Yet the second part of your question was
Morale.
Oh, morale. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, again, I'll credit our team for really dropping on a dime from, on Friday, March 13th, 2020, we said, we're going to go remote. If you're not in the office on Friday, you can come in on Monday and get your stuff. And then that's basically it. We're going to be remote. And, on a dime, they transitioned to remote. I think they have done not just as good of a job, it feels like they're more productive. It seems like we're getting more in this remote environment than we did when we were previously all together in the office. So that's been good to see. But on the other side, the thing I worry about is, we've either volunteered or have been asked to do certain projects, and I didn't want our team to burn out. They used a lot of overtime to figure out how they could do their day job with these other assignments. I mentioned hazard pay, but we also sent a team over to DOL in the spring to work on unemployment claims, and we also sent a team to ACCD to help with the business grants over the summer. So they were managing their time and in a way that I thought they could do. And again, they're professionals; they can handle themselves and not burn out. But but that was a concern, and we tried to at the supervisor level really work with the teams to make sure they have all the resources they need at home. They weren't feeling burned out. If they had a unique situation at home, we try to get them resources, make sure they understand the resources available to them, because it's not just a profession. I mean, obviously all the things that were happening in our professional lives, but the impact is greater on our personal lives. And so people were really dealing with a lot this year. We also brought in a couple of speakers about work-life balance and burnout and how to manage pandemic fatigue. Right. I think that was in November or December. And, again, just trying to have those resources that we can deliver. But we'll see in the employee engagement survey. But generally, we always rank really high on those surveys in terms of morale at the department, understanding your job, having the resources you need to do your job. And I expect that they'll continue to be really high. And if not, we'll figure out why and fix it.
Great. Thank you.
Brock, did I see your hand? Senator Brock.
Commissioner, I don't want to get you in trouble with your boss, but I've got a couple of questions and maybe I can get at them in a couple of different ways. And that is, you have a huge portfolio of things to look at and to oversee. Based on your current level of staffing and what you're able to do, what kinds of things should you be doing that you can't?
It's a good question, Senator. I just want to think about it because I don't want to give the answer that comes immediately to mind, which is that we feel very well resourced. I mean, not just from a financial standpoint, in terms of our budget, in terms of a personnel standpoint, we feel very well resourced in terms of who those people are that make up our team, really highly competent people as well. Whenever we need to stretch on a project, or, we need a little bit something more, or we take on something that's even permanent, we look at our staffing and think about that closely in terms of what can be accomplished with our team. Are there outside experts, consultants, actuaries that we need to bring on to help us with a particular project? And we're always, we're just always able to manage through that and do it. So in terms of our portfolio that we have, financial services, things sort of even auxiliary to financial services, I think our team continues to cover the field, in an extraordinary way.
What kinds of things in terms of oversight and things that ought to be regulated perhaps more closely than there are, is there anything else that you think your department should be doing that we haven't asked you to do?
Yeah, so let me answer that first part. There might be we're two parts there in terms of things that are maybe not regulated or not regulated to the degree that they should be. I'll just mention a couple of things that have state and federal implications in the financial services area. One is not a new thing, which is cryptocurrency. There's still a lot of concern about what agency, state, federal, combination of both, should be regulating cryptocurrency, the issuance of cryptocurrency, the exchange of it between individuals. And, that is something that continues. The other that has developed more recently, you've probably read a lot about it in the last couple of months, but with GameStop and, the activity of online social media being able to influence a stock, and what implications does that have for the future? My personal opinion on that is that, GameStop was a stock that was, didn't have a ton of value and was pretty lightly traded. And therefore, when you had a group of individuals come together and try to push the price up, they were able to be successful. You wouldn't be able to do that with Apple or GE or maybe GE now, but you wouldn't be able to do that with Apple or Google or any of the big stocks, right? So I don't think it has a broad market implications, but it does bring up a whole new host of consumer protection, investor protection issues that you just weren't thinking about a year ago. So I do think there are emerging issues that are coming up that we should be that we are thinking about, but that we should be working with our federal counterparts and developing regulation on.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I think you're on mute.
You're muted,
Sorry,
Madam Chair.
Trying to do three things at once. I shouldn't do that. Senator Pearson has a question.
It's not a question, just a note of gratitude. During the hazard pay, I was out in front of trying a group of us were Senator Ciarrocchi and Senator Ashton, among others, pushing some of these big companies to get their employees enrolled. And actually, we had enormous success. I can't think of my 15 years in the legislature of any press events or even policy change that a few weeks later resulted in checks in people's pockets. It was really great. But because I was doing that, the more we would appear in the press, the more people would write me about their quirky situation or, geez, I'd like to help my workers out. And I, it was a stressful time for everybody, including my household. And so I never knew who the right person to email was. And I would email the commissioner and without fail, within hours, sometimes late at night, he would answer. The next morning, if he hadn't answered already, there was an answer. And they were then reaching out to the business that had contacted me. So we don't get very many moments like this. I just wanted to express my clear thanks for your work on the record and personally helping me out and helping my folks out. It was absolutely noticed, not just by me, and appreciate your good work.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Sorokin.
Well, I want to echo that and say that I want to look another step further. I had several personal phone conversations with the commissioner, and he was really there on the side of consumers. I mean, he had a role to play, and he could push these big businesses as far as he could, but you can tell he thought he wanted to get that money out the door. I did have a question on health insurance, which you said you take great pride in fielding consumer complaints. How do you dovetail with the healthcare advocate in the state? Because I know they deal with health insurance complaints as well. Are you frequently in contact with Mike Fisher and that group? And I'd like your opinion as to what you think of the healthcare advocate as an independent group, because we were criticized way back when we established that as shadow government. And I think it was Bishka who was the main opponent to establishing a healthcare advocate. So if you could talk a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, for sure, Matt. I'd be happy to do that. Just in terms of what we think about the healthcare advocate and our relationship with him, but more importantly, I think with the office. One of those settlements I mentioned in 2019, it was toward the end of the year, but it was a student health insurance settlement, and the overall amount was about 1.9 million. A lot of that was restitution. There was a big penalty involved. We wanted a really big number. We wanted a number like that, like close to 2 million. And only, part of what it took to get us there was they didn't want to have a penalty over $1 million, but we wanted to have a total settlement more than that. So one of the things we did is we asked them, as part of the settlement, to contribute money to the healthcare advocate to Vermont Legal Aid, and it was not insignificant, maybe $200,000, something along those lines, because we know the work that they play. I mean, they work with consumers, they get them resolution. They have a broad array of issues that they deal with beyond health insurance as well. We wanted these issues be directed toward health insurance. And there was a connection there because we thought there would be people reaching out both to our department and their department about this settlement and how they got money under the restitution. So I think that just speaks to, the relationship that we've built over the years, that we respect them, that we would entrust them with settlement money like that to be able to support what their operations and be able to work with us collaboratively in resolving some of those. I talk to Mike Fisher with some frequency. It's usually not about, day-to-day consumer issues in terms of a specific consumer matter, I should say, but our teams do communicate with each other. Our consumer services team and his consumer services team, there are certain cases that I think are better handled with us. If there is a clear violation of law, we can get a resolution really quickly. If there's something that requires, just in the name of their organization, more advocacy, more, something that's giving them advice, it's just that's not necessarily a role that we play. And, they might be able to do, we try not to play it. Obviously, if we can help someone, we'll do what we can to help them. But that's a role that maybe is a little bit better suited for someone like Legal Aid and the Healthcare Advocates Office. So I think we do the best we can to not have overlap, to together work with the best interests of Vermonters and Vermont consumers in mind. And I think we've developed a good relationship and had success doing that last few years.
Thank you.
Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Strockens reminds me of a question related to healthcare. Maybe this is, tell me if this is not the right, if you're not the right person to ask. This fall, when UVMMC had the, what did we call it? The cyber attack. There were a bunch of people that were having procedures and surgeries and whatever that had to be delayed. And as you know, in our crazy healthcare system, a lot of people schedule procedures late in the calendar year because they've already met their deductible. And that means they don't pay any more out of pocket. So we had a cyber attack, everything gets delayed. Now they're pushed into January and February. Suddenly they're paying $1,000, $2,000 just for totally it has no fault of theirs, no fault of the hospital. The only beneficiary is our insurers, who suddenly pay for the same procedure and pay, a way far less cost. I did reach out to Blue Cross to see if they were dealing with it. They had some rather unsatisfying answer about, well, customers could let us know if this was a problem. We didn't hear from anyone. Is that something you guys have thought about? Have you looked into it? Do you even have the mechanics to be able to address this? Seems grossly unfair to me and would be meaningful difference to a lot of people's lives in terms of the cash outlay.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Senator. So just to add to the layers of issues that you identified, even without a pandemic, it's an issue, right? People try to get their procedures, especially with specialists, scheduled, and it becomes challenging toward the end of the year. Throw on top of what you said, the COVID procedures and not being able to schedule as many visits and as many procedures as you might in a normal time period. It became a particular crunch this year. We were concerned about it back in even October when we started to hear concerns and complaints about it. We looked into the issue, what could be a resolution, what could be done. There are regulations and laws on the books that allow a Vermont consumer to go out of network to get a procedure if the in-network services can't be delivered to them because of scheduling issues. So, there are mechanisms to try to get people their procedures. But of course, if that same issue is happening across the region, that's not really a solution. And we also don't believe people are very well informed of that ability to go outside a network without any penalty or any extra cost when those issues arise. So we looked at it. We do believe that needs to be communicated better to consumers on an annual basis so that they understand that, not just related to a pandemic, but on a routine basis when they get toward the end of the year. We also are doing this health insurance review in terms of looking at premium collected in 2020, and did that premium outpace the amount of claims that were paid and the amount of claims that are anticipated to come back in 2021. That work is ongoing, but that that work will have an element of what you're talking about. You know, if people overpaid, what does that mean and how do you get money back to them? So I don't know. I don't think my answer is going to be satisfactory either, because I had our team look at it and we just couldn't find a way to, you know, identify and solve the problem on a policy basis. But if there are individual consumers or constituents that you hear from, and we've told this to others as well in the legislature and other places, please do have them reach out to us, because although we couldn't find a satisfactory global policy on this issue for this past year, we do believe we can work with individual consumers to try to get their situation resolved, you know, if they come forward to us.
All right, thank you.
So, any other questions? Thank you, Commissioner. This was very helpful and very positive. So thank you very much. And we will get back to you when we're, you know, once we vote on your appointment. So thanks.
Great.
And
Well, thank you very
committee,
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, committee. We've got more time than we need, I think, on this next one. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple things that are going on. You remember Friday, the next thing on the agenda is voting for the Commissioner of Financial Regulation and the Commissioner of Taxes. I'm holding off on Commissioner of the Department of Public Service because I was concerned about accusations that were made against both her and probably everybody, including this committee, and we're going to be looking into those. I was inclined to use the word hatchet job. I thought it was pretty brutal. And I think this committee needs to decide what the end result is. What do you want to accomplish with all of this? I have no intention of introducing a bill that would require the governor to appoint somebody else. I have some concerns about separation of powers. I might, however, introduce a bill that would require that people pay for their public records unless they're on some form of state financial support, because at least the department has stopped invoicing one person because he has never paid for a public record. And I'm not sure that that's fair to everybody else and to the workers in that department. They might be able to do more of what we'd like if they weren't chasing down public records and not being compensated for their time. The other thing that's happened, and I thought it was me, and apparently it wasn't, we had Commissioner Bolio in last Friday to talk about the link up with the federal tax code. And he did tell us that there was a cost, and I do remember hearing 12 million to it, but he said doing nothing would be worse. I thought I'd missed something, but apparently I hadn't. The last I'd heard, the tax link up was where it usually is, which was in the miscellaneous tax bill. I gather somewhere in the House process, it got attached to 315. I was under the impression that everybody was moving forward for this and it was being fast tracked because we had to avoid people with incorrect tax forms and codes, and, you know, bedlam would reign if we didn't move forward. I emailed, when we finished, I emailed Senator Kitchell and said we had voted to support the link and to put it on the, and to move the date to March. However, nobody had ever talked to Senator Kitchell about the $12 million hit on this year's budget. So I think, and Senator Sirotkin was in on the discussion this morning, we're probably going to remove the whole link up. Are we going to remove it and give some more time? The other alternative was to let it go to conference. I guess if we pull it, it goes to conference, and then the committees of jurisdiction will have some more time to work out with the commissioner. The feds did this. They dumped new tax codes in end of February, 1st of March. And we are all struggling to figure out how to deal with it. So I think, as far as I know, that's what's happening. Michael, did you get a different? I know your committee had the commissioner in this morning.
It sounded to me like Senator Kitchell was going to go in the direction of pulling it and giving us everybody more time. It's basically a finance issue as to whether it should be passed through or linked up. I mean, we heard 5 minutes in economic development, and I felt like I was listening to the mainframe at UI again, where they said the whole system would shut down if we didn't link up. It would be havoc. So I thought that was enough to hear to give pause to at least, because I don't think Senator Kitchell really heard that. As she explained, she saw your email, but she didn't see the date change. She just saw it looks good.
Yeah.
But you had said change it to March 21st. And
I think it's the $12 million hit that was concerning. And I don't know why, with crunch week and the number of bills the Probst has been putting out in the last 2 weeks. And this fast track one has been bouncing back and forth. So Senator McDonald.
Madam Chair, when I first heard they were postponing income tax until May 15th, it seemed to be to resolve this dilemma period. Perhaps you and the Chair of Appropriations and Senator Sirotkin could speak to the tax commissioner and have a conversation, and there may be a solution that the four of you come to consensus on. And maybe, conference committee would provide the time, and so that would,
Yeah.
I'm glad you're taking this up.
I think that's exactly what we're trying to get. I mean, last week, when I suddenly got this email saying, well, it's, the link up's in 3:15, and I'm saying, well, my committee is taken, some testimony on the PPP issue, and I knew Senator Sirotkin had concerns. And my primary concern was to let you know what was going on, because it could feel like, there was an end run trying to get, and I understand people are doing their taxes now and need to know the tax forms are correct, or they'll have to file again. I understand that urgency, but it sounds like we need time to just think it through. So if you hear that motion on the floor tomorrow, that's what's happening. Okay, I've got Senator Hardy and then Senator Pearson.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks for clearing this up. Yesterday, I was emailing constituents saying, "Oh, we did this in H3."
I was too.
And then I was
What's your
told that we
problem?
weren't, and I got incredibly confused, and I thought maybe I misheard the whole thing and I didn't understand it, and had left you a message and also talked to Senator Kitchell and the commissioner trying to figure this all out, and it was very confusing to me. I was like, I felt like gaslit in a way, like, wait, I thought we talked about this. So I'm glad that you also remember talking about it and that we had agreed in the committee. And it's good to know that we're going to take a little more time to figure this out, because it does seem like it would be problematic not to do it, even if there is this, revenue impact. So,
I think they, approach just needs time to think through, is this the best way to spend it? Or they just need time to process the the financial implications.
right. But one question I had for you, Madam Chair, is I was also told that House Ways and Means was dealing with this today.
I think they
have you
may be
all been in-
taking testimony on it today. But I don't
Okay,
know.
I just want to make sure we're coordinating with the other body to make sure they're not surprised too.
I think that's why it's going to conference.
Got it. Okay, great.
And
Thank you.
We'll, but this is where we find the limits of Zoom. Because normally Senator Kitchell would send somebody over and I would be in appropriations explaining, and then I would come back and explain to you why they didn't like what we might do. So it is the limitations. I got Senator Pearson and then Senator Brock.
So forgive me, Madam Chair, but is it the policy that we're linking to that costs us money, or something mechanical? I must have missed something. And so I had understood there was a significant urgency, and maybe you're saying the extra month softens that urgency, but I'd like to understand that. And I'd like to understand where the $12 million comes in. I mean, we had that discussion.
The 12 million comes in from, because all our revenue forecasts have treated unemployment insurance as taxable income. And there's some people who are making somewhat more with all the, the kind of federal benefits than they would have if they were working minimum wage jobs. And to take that out as say, no, that's now tax exempt. I think
Which is what Congress just did.
Yes, on the federal level, if we tax exempt it on our level, it looks like we will collect $12 million less in revenue.
Well,
so
okay, that. Thank you. Now I understand. That's where I think Senator Sorokin and I were coming from on the business side of the same exact discussion. It's so interesting. We always have a little more heartburn when it seems to be we're trying to help working people, but I hope we will go forward. The dollar figures floating around this year are unlike anything I've ever experienced. I think probably any of us have. And I don't envy Approps because they've got to put it all on one piece of paper. But, in terms of a priority, having just agreed to hand the relief to businesses, I would say we should do the same to folks who working families.
I know one of the concerns that Senator Kitchell has is we were just talking about hazard pay. Now, there's been concern that the folks that are out there working and risking were getting paid less than folks who weren't in some instances. And now they're going to pay taxes on their income, and the folks that aren't, which gives you some equity questions. The feds did this. They did it probably at midnight, not thinking, oh, gee, all of our states have already printed their tax forms and the federal government has already printed their tax forms. And many people have already filled them out in March, but that's where we are. So Senator Brock. Oh, you're muted.
Based on everything that you have heard so far, and indeed all of us have heard, I'm gathering that this is a question not of what, but of how, in terms of the delay. Is that, Madam Chair, your understanding based on where you think we are?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think in the end, we're going to do it. but that's just a gut feeling. I think we would like to help people that have been unemployed and, understand that times is still tough. I think we also would like to get some equity for the folks that kept working and are going to pay some taxes. And I think, how are we going to do that? How are we going to make up the revenue, or what aren't we going to do? When you give up 12 million in revenue, you're not going to do something somewhere else. So I think it's just going to take the Propes a little time to process this. And this is probably the worst week of the year to ask them to do it, except maybe the last week of the session. Because we had a really light crunch week this year. We weren't in here into the night hours, and we didn't do 5 net metering bills in 2 days, which we did once. So I think that committee just needs time to take a breath and figure out how to deal with this. And I think they need some time to sit down and have a calm discussion with the commissioner about what is the worst case scenario? What would it cost? Who would be, if you did all of these things and didn't pass it through, how would that work? So that's what's going on. And I see Sarah Hoffman is waiting, and on the agenda is voting for, I've lost my agenda now, is voting for Commissioner of Financial Regulation, the Commissioner of the Department of Taxes. Is anybody ready to do that? There was no urgency. We can put it on another time. I'm
We'll
seeing
do it
some-
now if we're all ready.
Do it now.
Okay, well, let's have a motion here.
I'll move that we confirm both of them, or 2 motions if you would like.
Probably 2 motions, they're commissioners.
All right, I will move that we confirm Commissioner Bolio.
Okay. And Senator Brock has moved that we confirm Commissioner Bolio as the Commissioner of the Department of Taxes. Further discussion? Senator Hardy.
Thank you. I just have a question. Aren't we voting on whether to recommend his,
Yes,
to the full Senate and then the
the
Senate?
full Senate,
Okay,
Correct.
right.
Great.
And this one will take somebody to report it. So, any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed say no. I call that 7-0, right? I'm counting. Okay, now we have Commissioner Pichek for Department of Financial Regulation.
I move we recommend his confirmation. Is that the right motion?
Okay. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
I,
No. 7-0-0. And would the makers of the motion like to report those
Sure.
when we get to them in May? These actually do take a
stand
full
up.
report.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So now we can move along. And
Madam Chair,
yes,
I'd like to, when Senator Brock was muted, it made me think Senator Sorokin is doing a great job with the mute button this year. And I think we should just notice that.
Watch it, Senator Pearson.
I tip my hat to you, Senator.
it was a chant last
Be
year.
careful there, boy.
You come a long way.
Easy. Cowboy.
Okay. So anyway, after last Friday, I decided it might be a good idea if we just got some basic information on the Public Utility Commission, the Public Service Department, kind of their history and who's supposed to do what and what are their kind of legal requirements. And it was suggested that we ask Sarah Hoffman, who to those of us who have been on this committee is a familiar person. You have just stepped down from the PUC.
I actually, Senator Cummings, thank you very much. I'm beyond my expiration date now. The governor has not, I've made it clear that I was not seeking reappointment. They're going through the process. There should be somebody appointed any day now, but in the meantime, you've got me, and that can be dangerous when somebody's at the end of their career. Who knows what I'll say? But I am sitting on the PUC right now.
Okay, but you also have a history with the department, right? You want to tell the committee about that?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me today. But yes, many of you know me. Some of you haven't seen me in quite some time, and some of you have never seen me at all because I haven't been over to testify in front of you for quite some time. I am on the Public Utility Commission. I am fulfilling a 6-year term. And I am looking forward to retirement. So, kind of waiting for that new successor to be named. I've also been at the department. I was at the Department of Public Service for 17 years as a staff attorney, as the Director for Public Advocacy and Consumer Affairs and Public Information, and also as the Deputy Commissioner. I've also been the Executive Director of the Regional Organization of Commissions, known as the New England Conference of Public Utility Commissioners. So I'm also very familiar with all the other commissions in New England. I think it's my tenure at both agencies that brings me here today. I want to reiterate that although I have served at both entities, the department and the Public Utility Commission, they are completely separate agencies. That is the hardest thing sometimes for the public to understand. We did change our name from the Public Service Board to the Public Utility Commission to help with that. It does help a little. It doesn't help as much as I thought it might. At least people realize there are two names going on here. They sometimes still conflate us as one agency, but we are definitely two independent agencies. This talk originally was labeled The History of Utility Regulation, which I actually thought was great because I don't think I could do that in 30 minutes, but I thought it was wonderful. I could do one of those things where I try to shorten everything to absurdity, but I actually got the impression that you were very interested in how the Public Utility Commission and the Department of Public Service both operate and where the overlaps are and what our different responsibilities are. In a nutshell, just so we go back to kind of the title a little bit, the utility regulation is a substitute for competition. Usually it's free markets that set prices for goods and services based on supply and demand. But it was decided that for utilities, that made no sense to have double poles, double wires, or even more than that. In fact, originally, electricity had many different providers, and they were all putting up their own networks. And obviously, at some point, somebody said, this is not very efficient. So the idea of establishing monopoly territories was come up with, and regulations were developed to ensure fair price, adequate service, consumer protections, and safety standards. So that's a lot of things they're supposed to be doing, but a lot of it is beyond just being a substitute for competition when you're talking about also putting in safety standards and consumer protections. Today, the Public Utility Commission and the Department of Public Service. Oh, I should say, if anybody, if I go off on a tangent you're not interested in, please let me know. I'm happy to answer questions you have. Today, the PUC and the Department of Public Service both have jurisdiction over Vermont public utilities. That's electric, gas, energy efficiency, telecommunications, cable television, and water. But depending on the level of competition in an industry and federal preemption, how much the federal government is taking up a space, the level of regulation varies. For instance, we regulate the terms and services for a cable company, but not its rates. A lot of people also want us to regulate what channels they get and things like that. We do not do that. The federal government does that. And so we are preempted from that space. But we can do some terms and service and things to make sure that they are playing, they are letting consumers know exactly what they're getting. There are written tariffs. Other things that might come up are, when somebody wants to expand their franchise or change their franchise, those kind of things come before us. Before 1982, the Public Utility Commission and the Department of Public Service were one entity. The Vermont legislature wisely chose, in my estimation, to create two distinct and independent agencies. In broad terms, the Vermont PUC, then known as the Public Service Board, became the independent quasi-judicial or decision-making entity, and the Department of Public Service became the public advocate and the Energy Office and is part of the executive branch. The department is a party that presents its case before the Public Utility Commission, just like any other party. And as such, they are treated like any other party, and the Public Utility Commission makes its decision based on the evidence from all the parties to a proceeding. I can't reiterate enough, the two parties, the two entities function completely separately on all state utility matters. However, there are some things on regional, like wholesale markets, or federal, let's say we're trying to recommend to the FCC to behave in a certain way or to create a rule that does something, we can cooperate on those things. Anything to do with a case before the Public Utility Commission, we don't cooperate with them. We are separate. They present a case to us. That's a little different on rulemaking. Obviously, the ex parte rules that dictate so much of what we do, how we cannot talk about cases with parties. Always in a rulemaking, you're accepting comments, et cetera, from a wide variety of both private and public entities. My understanding is that you're most interested in the responsibilities of the department, and there are many of those. Remember, my knowledge is a little bit dated, not terribly, since I watch from my perch now as to what the department is doing. I do have a simple organizational chart for the department that I thought would help me explain the department's responsibilities. And I sent that earlier to Faith Brown, it was very helpful. So if you could put that one slide up, Faith, I'll walk people through what the responsibilities of the department are. Like I said, there are many responsibilities. I'm going to start at the left where you see Public Advocacy Division, the public advocate. That is Jim Porter at this point in time. One of the things about the department is they have to act as the public advocate, but also keep in mind the public good. In some states, you might have just the Consumer Counsel who advocates for the lowest rates. In Vermont, because of our structure, the department advocates for the lowest rates, taking into account our laws and public policy. A perfect example of that is the net metering program. The net metering program is actually a fairly expensive way for Vermont to obtain solar power, but it is something that, there are a lot of public policy reasons why we still encourage the net metering program. And, that's one where the public advocate, if it was just Consumer Counsel, would advocate for the lowest rate. So if you look in some states, you will see Consumer Counsel definitely wanting to get rid of net metering programs that pay a premium for, let's say, home solar. That's different here because the Department of Public Service is not only looking at the low rate, but also the public policy that's involved as well. The second one over is the Planning Division. This is where This is a lot of the telecommunications plans, the comprehensive energy plan, putting those plans out and working with other state agencies to get those completed. We have Energy Efficiency and Resources Division. Obviously, Vermont's been a leader in its energy efficiency efforts for many, many years. And it takes a lot of regulation, though, to have an energy efficiency utility like we do. You want to make sure they're getting the most bang for the buck and they are not getting rate increases that are not necessary. And so the energy efficiency does a lot of obviously the energy efficiency piece, but they're looking at how all of the pieces fit together in the state as well. Engineering division is pretty straightforward. Almost any project has some engineering element that comes with it, whether it's poles and wires, you're building something, how does the system work, are circuits overloaded? You always need an engineer. You don't see them as much. They're a little more behind the scenes, but a very important part of what the department does. Then you have telecom and the connectivity division. I think many of you are familiar with this part. Obviously, getting broadband out to more of the state has been such a piece that's been in the forefront in the last couple of years, but definitely during the pandemic, since the broadband became such a critical service for almost anybody who lives in this state. The last thing is Consumer Affairs and Administrative Services Division. I'll really speak to Consumer Affairs, which is basically they're helping consumers. You end up with a billing problem with your utility. People call the Consumer Affairs Division, and Consumer Affairs helps sort that out. They also are the ones who figure out what kind of what kind of information needs to be pushed out to the public. And they also play a key role in being part of that piece in the department. I was at the department for many years, and in order to decide on a position in a particular case, all of these divisions might be involved in that discussion. And so from a consumer standpoint, the consumer affairs person might be saying, well, looking through our records, we have 26 complaints on that utility because of X. And somebody else from engineering might say, and they aren't doing vegetative management that works well, they need to bulk that up. And somebody from planning might be saying, gee, they're not really complying with our renewable energy standards. So what are we going to, how are we going to attack that? And then the public advocate is trying to blend all of those things and figure out what the right position in a case is. So basically that is, and thank you very much, Faith, you can take that one down now. Really, the bottom line is they are preparing cases that come before the Public Utility Commission. We also have staff and experts that help us make the decisions and to search through the testimony to figure out what evidence is there to help us make our decision. And we have to make sure there's an evidentiary basis, no matter whether it's from the department, ANR, a private citizen who's become an intervener, what is in that record. And so we're making a decision based on the totality of the evidence. We have analysts and lawyers. The department has analysts and lawyers, and they have more engineers. And both of the entities do function separately. Now, I want to pause because I think I've been talking and wanted to make sure you guys have a chance to ask any questions you have.
Committee, any questions at this point? Okay, I'm not seeing any.
Okay, so thank you. It is an awfully nice day outside. I'm surprised everybody's here. I'm so impressed. The other thing I wanted to make sure that one of the things, as when I was the public advocate, I think one question I often was faced with when I was out in front of the public was, how do we make decisions in terms of, a lot of people think that as the public advocate, I should have been the public advocate for them and their position. But you can have interveners in a case that have absolutely opposing views on, let's say, something controversial, like a wind case. You have a camp that says, no, we don't want this, and another camp that says, but this is good for Vermont. So I would often get asked, how do I make that decision in terms of what the position is? And that's where I go back to showing you all those divisions within the department and having all of those come together to talk and really vet and hammer out what is within the law and what was within the policy that the state has set forward. Now we have the res, we look to the res, we look to the comprehensive energy plan, so we basically hammer out positions that need to be taken. You always have to do that within what the legal structure is. And in the end, I often found that about half the people were mad at the position we took and half the people were pleased, but it isn't like there's any one constituency that the Department of Public Service represents. They represent the entire state, the public good, and what the costs are going into that. Is there another way to accomplish this at a lower cost? Okay, let's look at that, but then let's look at what the state's goals are, because we have a lot of goals and we have a lot of not just goals, we have standards that need to be met. And how does this all fit into the bigger framework?
Senator Hardy.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Hoffman, for being here with us today. I have an example of my one interaction with public advocate, and it sounds like your description fits exactly the way this person or the department acted. And I just wanted to see if you can confirm that, or if I'm understanding it through my example, which was there. Senator Bray and I represent a small community, Granville, where there's a proposed cell phone tower. And I started hearing from constituents in that town, some who were very supportive and wanted the cell phone tower to go through and thought it would be great to have better cell service. And then some who were really concerned and didn't want it to go through and thought there would be an impact to the view and the forest. And so I didn't know what to do. It didn't feel like it was my job to take a position on it. So I reached out to the commissioner and she put me in touch with the public advocate who helped both of these parties understand what the process was and how they could advocate and how they could access the process and provide testimony and get their questions answered, and then and be on the record with their concerns. And I don't know what the end result was. I just put them in touch with the advocate and then he took it from there. But is that a good example of how this at least works at the beginning of the process?
It's a great example. Thank you for bringing that up, Senator. The other thing, it also brings up the idea that the other thing the department often does, and that I did a lot of, is you're working with different parties and not trying to settle the case, but trying to actually get them to talk to each other. So one person who says, my gosh, that's right in my view shed. And, the department has the freedom to then ask the party, well, could you move your tower over? Can you move it to the west? Can you move it to the east? And so the department has the freedom to do that. We don't, the Public Utility Commission doesn't negotiate with people, but the department does and has done that for a long time, and at least gets the parties to try to talk to each other and also to try to see where there could be compromises made. But then in the end, explaining the process to them and how if they become a party, they can bring that to the Public Utility Commission. And you might have two people with very different views and they both decide they want to be interveners in the case. They would join the case, present their case. The department would have their case. Maybe A&R would have a position. Maybe Historic Preservation or the Department of Agriculture the Agency of Agriculture have views on this, and they would bring evidence to us. And that is how finally somebody makes a decision. The Public Utility Commission makes a decision. Our decisions are appealable to the Vermont Supreme Court. So, but it is a perfect example of how all of these things, not only, before a case is done and then when a case actually comes before the Public Utility Commission, how it all kind of fits together.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Bracken.
So, in terms of the consumer inquiries or complaints, I thought I read something that, maybe it's the public advocate, but I thought I read something that reporting has ceased and, or annual reports. I'm just trying to get a sense of what the volume of calls and resolutions of cases that are open, that box all the way to the right about consumer complaints. Do you get thousands? You get hundreds?
When I was at the Department of Public Service and was actually head of the Consumer Affairs Division, as well as the Department of Public Advocacy, there are thousands of cases that come to the department for, to see if they can help with a resolution. Some of them are like people want responses on their internet service, which of course is not jurisdictional. We do not regulate either the department or the Public Utility Commission. We don't regulate internet cases. However, the Department of Public Service has often called a provider for someone to try to see if they could straighten out a problem that was happening. So that goes into a different bucket. That's not considered a jurisdictional complaint. But I believe the Consumer Affairs and Public Information entity at the Department of Public Service does put out a publication still yearly about the number of cases. I might be wrong about that, Senator. A great question to ask. But remember, annual reports somewhere along the line are no longer required of the Department of Public Service or the PUC. We filed one anyway, but I don't think it is a requirement any longer. But in terms of the consumer issues that come up, it is, there are hundreds and probably thousands of them. It depends, it can be anything from, a bill dispute, also people who are behind on their utility payments, let's say to an electric company might ask for help in trying to negotiate something to keep their lights on. It can be, telephone service quality. That's been one that different things pop up at different times as things go around the state and people experience problems with them. But really the department, very few consumer complaints make it all the way to the Public Utility Commission, thanks to the fact that the Consumer Affairs Division tries to work them out before they ever come to the formal adjudicatory stage. So kudos to the many consumer affairs people who spend a lot of time on the telephone with people who are sometimes kind of desperate because they're going to lose service.
So I guess that's what I'm sort of after, to know whether this is very voluminous in terms of people calling the Public Service Department. I, for one, maybe because of my position, I might suggest that to a constituent, but I'm guessing a lot of constituents don't have a clue that the Public Service Department is out there to offer help. And do any of the billings, which I'm sure is a big problem, is there a requirement on utility bills that here's the phone number for the Consumer Public Service Department advocate to help you if you have questions?
I should remember this, but I don't. I'm not sure it's a requirement, but almost all the utilities do have the phone number. For those who get a paper bill, it probably is on your electronic bill as well, although I haven't looked in a long time, that has the phone number for the Consumer Affairs Division if you're having a problem or a dispute with your utility. So I can't tell you if it's a requirement, but most of the utilities do that.
Thank you.
It is to their benefit as well, because if that doesn't happen and that dispute comes to the Public Utility Commission, that's up a step. They have to then come to us with that complaint, and it may not be a major issue. It is to the person making the complaint, but you don't want to escalate everything up to the Public Utility Commission. And in many ways, the Consumer Affairs Division is like a safety valve for people.
And we had an email from Jim Porter explaining about the annual reports and what was and wasn't still required. And I had that sent out to all of you. You may have gotten 2 copies at this point, but it is out there. Sarah, there's been some talk about staffing levels. Do you know what how many personnel were there when you were there? And do you know offhand what it is now?
I'm afraid I do not know that. I know there are more people in the telecommunications and connectivity division than there used to be. But I think the lawyers, they may be down 1, but Senator, I probably should stop talking. I think there are less in some areas and more in others.
Okay, so we will check on that, but no drastic changes. And yeah, and as I remember 4 years ago, the department was in severe financial trouble because all these things used to be between utility attorneys and utility attorneys. And there was nothing that came in from the solar, and we changed that. So they did get some funding, and they were solvent the last I heard, but they did have some very lean years.
I want to thank you for that change because the nature of our work has changed quite a bit over the years. And it used to be that through the gross receipts tax, the utilities were paying for our services, and then we had all these solar developers and individuals. And so it's not a huge filing fee, but there is a filing fee, and it does help. So thank you very much.
Okay, we did some changes to try and make the process a little more consumer friendly for those that are not trained utility lawyers. And I haven't heard that might even have been longer ago. But it was at least, I think it might have been like 6-8 years ago, but I know we did do some changing.
We did.
Okay.
And those have helped, and those have really helped. I think it's still, people are somewhat daunted because it is a legal process. The Public Utility Commission is a legal process, but we have a lot more documents out there helping people through it. And I do know that the department, through the Division of Public Advocacy, does help people understand, very basic things like, people don't know how to file a motion. How do you do that? And so that has really, that commission that met, the Act 64, I can't remember the act number, really did help make it easier for private people to come to the Public Utility Commission and put their case on.
Committee, Senator Bray.
Hi, Ms. Hoffman. So in the deliberations at the PUC over changing the operations and making them a little more user friendly, did you all end up debating the notion of having an attorney that was basically like almost like the pro se litigant attorney, that someone who would basically assist people who are coming in who weren't represented by formal attorneys the way major parties are when they proceed?
I think both the Public Utility Commission and the Public Service Department have both grappled with that over time. Should there be someone set aside to just answer those questions? I think in the end, it just has fallen on all the lawyers down at the Public Service Department. I mean, we can't, the Public Utility Commission, we're the judges, okay? So we can't tell people, do this, and I'll probably grant that. But I think that we've all grappled with how to make this an easier process. And I think really it comes down to the lawyers at the at the Public Service Department who help people understand, to actually get your case before the commission, here's what you do, and walking people through things. you got to be careful. They can't be giving legal advice, but they
Sure.
can advise on how to do things, the nuts and bolts of how to do things. But it was talked about, you're right, Senator Bray, about having one person do that. I think there are pros and cons to that because, as that person, many times on a case, you'll have pro se people who are on both sides of the issue. Are they supposed to be helping both of them? How are they going to do that? Is there going to be some sort of wall between somebody who helps one side and help somebody who helps the other side? So it is a little tricky, but it has been at least over time, over my career, which is quite lengthy. It has been it's been debated a number of times,
Sure.
including intervener funding as well.
Well, it was definitely, another thing that's been very helpful is EPUC.
Mm.
The documents, it's not always that easy to find something, but there is the treasure trove of documents. Once you've got your docket number straight and all the rest, there's a lot of documents that were a lot harder to get are now readily available. So thanks for standing that system up.
Well, thank you, because it has helped all of us tremendously. And I know what you mean. I mean, sometimes it's a little tricky, but most of the time, almost all the advocates are telling us that it is so much better. And I love that I can search just by town to see what's happening in a place, even if I don't know the case number. But really almost universal praise for that system. I think we have a couple of detractors, but basically it has been a success, and we've made it easier to use. So you can be a guest. You don't have to get a password, etc.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Okay. Senator McDonald.
So you said you were retiring shortly?
I am any day now, Senator.
So I just wanted to say that in my experience watching you at work, you were always loyal to your bosses. You displayed humor. You were certainly quick-witted and never ducked a challenge. Two of us on this committee will remember the day that you had demonstrated all of those skills in a period of just a couple minutes. And I am grateful for the experience that I learned, which was I learned a thing or two about how to apologize.
Oh.
And I will always remember that the day, and how once all that was done with, you continued right on as you always did. And we overuse the word thank you these days in the Senate, but it was an important lesson, and it was delivered kindly. So I am grateful.
Thank you so much. We've obviously had our ups and downs, but it's been a good run. It really has been a good run, and it's been a pleasure to work with so many of you.
Thank you, Sarah. I would say you did handle that incident very smoothly. My goal is to get you out of here today without any mention of any form of firearms in any nation in the world. And I think we're going to make it. Are there any final questions? Because we're into break time. I'm going to try and get your 15-minute break, and then we've got a very last minute amendment to S60. That's why we passed over the bill today, because that bill is so technical. I'm not going to tweak anything without knowing what else might get tweaked as a consequence. So we'll be back to do that. Thank you, Sarah. This was very helpful.
Thank you very much. And I really appreciate it, especially to be able to say to folks, it's been a pleasure working with you. Take care, everybody, and go outside for your break.
Yes, it is
Thank you.
lovely outside.
Enjoy your retirement.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So committee, I'll see you back in 15 minutes. 3:30, we start again. No, 3:15.